There was a group text I stopped reading sometime around year 4. I would see the notification, feel something tighten in my chest, and set the phone face down on the table. Then I would pick it back up 3 hours later and scroll through quickly, not really absorbing anything, just marking myself as present. Just maintaining the record that I had been there. I told myself I was busy. I told myself it didn't matter that much. I told myself I would feel more like myself in the conversation when things settled down a little, when work slowed, when winter ended, when I got more sleep. I was 31 years old and I had been friends with these people since I was 23, and somewhere in the middle of that stretch of time I had quietly, without any ceremony or announcement, stopped wanting to be. The group was built around Marcos, or more precisely, around the gravitational field that Marcos generated wherever he went. I met him at a graphic design firm where we both worked in our mid-20s, back when I still thought the firm's particular brand of cynical cleverness was a worldview worth having. Marcos was funny in the way that people are funny when they have decided that irony is armor, and his humor had a contagious quality that made you feel smart for getting it. Around him had accumulated, over time, a rotating cast of about 8 or 9 people who all shared this sensibility, the slight curl of the lip at things that were sincere, the performance of not trying too hard, the private language of references that served as a kind of bouncer at the door of the social group. You had to know the passwords. I had learned them fluently. At 23, learning them had felt like an achievement. By 31, fluency in a language you no longer believe in is its own kind of trap. The group met every few weeks, dinners, a standing Saturday at a particular bar, a yearly camping trip that everyone complained about in advance and then posted about afterward as if it had been sacred. I attended almost everything. I showed up, I contributed the expected register of observations, I laughed at the right moments, and then I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes before going inside. Not because I was processing some profound emotion. More because I needed a minute to feel like myself again after spending an evening being someone adjacent to myself. I had started to notice this around year 3, the driveway minutes. But I had a very efficient system for not noticing that I noticed. I told myself it was introversion, just the normal decompression after social effort. I told myself Marcos could be a lot, and that was true, but it had always been true and hadn't mattered before. I told myself the group was going through a weird period, someone had broken up with someone, there was low-grade tension about money, the kind of friction that every long-running friend group accumulates. I told myself it would recalibrate. I was very good at telling myself things. What I was less good at was asking myself why I found the group's particular brand of conversation so exhausting when it once hadn't been. That question had a real answer, and the answer was that I had changed. Somewhere between 23 and 31, through a job I'd left for something I found more meaningful, through a relationship that had asked me to be more honest than I was comfortable being, through the ordinary accumulation of experiences that slowly, incrementally, shift what a person values, I had become someone who found sincerity interesting rather than embarrassing. Someone who didn't want to spend evenings managing the performance of not caring. Someone for whom the private language of the group had started to feel less like belonging and more like obligation. The identity had gotten entangled with the membership. This is the part that took me years to see clearly. I didn't just think of the group as people I spent time with. I thought of them as evidence of who I was, evidence that I had been young and sharp and funny in a particular city at a particular time, evidence of a version of myself that I had been proud of. Leaving the group would have meant leaving that version behind. And leaving that version behind would have required admitting that I had needed to leave it behind, which implied it had never entirely fit, which implied something uncomfortable about 8 years of my life. What I understand now that I did not understand then is that this is not a calculation that ever resolves in favor of leaving. The math is set up to keep you in place. Every year that passes adds to the weight on the wrong side of the scale. Every year makes the sunk cost feel more sunk, makes the investment feel more worth protecting, makes the leaving feel more like a verdict on everything that preceded it. You cannot win the argument against 8 years. You can only stop having the argument, which means staying. I stayed through year 5. Year 6. I got quieter at the dinners. I started having scheduling conflicts, not invented, exactly, but selected from a larger pool of possible conflicts with care. I stopped posting on the group thread. One Saturday I was supposed to go to the bar and instead I went to a bookshop and then sat in a cafe for 2 hours reading, and when someone texted asking where I was I said I wasn't feeling well, which was true in a way that I couldn't have explained then. Someone from the group, a woman named Sonia who had always been sharper than she let on around Marcos, texted me separately that week. She said, "You seem like you've been somewhere else for a while." I said, "Yeah, work has been a lot." She said, "Okay." And I knew, in the way you know things you are not ready to say out loud, that she didn't believe me, and that she was right not to. The actual end was not dramatic. There was no fight, no confrontation, no moment that could be pointed to as the rupture. I just, gradually, and then completely, stopped going. Stopped responding to the thread. Waited for someone to notice enough to ask directly, and when Marcos texted me after about 2 months, "Hey, you good?" I said I was fine, just going through a lot, would be back in the mix soon. I said that and then I didn't do it, and after a while the expectation faded. The group continued. They probably still have the camping trip. I genuinely hope they do. What I had not anticipated was how long I would feel guilty about something I had not done to anyone. I hadn't said anything cruel. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had simply, quietly, declined to keep attending a thing I didn't want to attend. And yet the guilt was specific and persistent, not the vague guilt of a bad decision, but the specific guilt of betrayal. As if attendance were a contract I had broken. As if the years of showing up had created an obligation that could not be dissolved without formal proceedings. That guilt, I think now, was the last mechanism of the thing keeping itself in place. Because guilt is a reason to go back. Guilt is a door the group text can still walk through. Feeling guilty meant I was still, in some functional sense, a member, still accountable to a standard the group set, still measuring my behavior by what the group would think of it. The guilt was the group's continued presence in my nervous system long after I had physically left. I sat with it for about a year. Not dramatically. Just the low-grade presence of it, the way you're aware of a bruise you keep accidentally touching. What I came to, slowly, was not a verdict on the group or on Marcos or on any of the specific people involved. They were not villains. The group had been exactly what it was, consistently, for 8 years. It had not changed and then failed me. I had changed and then stayed anyway, and the staying was the choice that cost me something. The staying was the thing worth examining. Because I had stayed, I now understood, not because the group was worth staying for, but because leaving would have required me to look directly at the fact that I had changed, that the person I was at 31 did not naturally want the things the person I was at 23 had wanted, and that looking was uncomfortable in a way that the staying was not, or at least not yet. This is the mechanism. This is the thing that keeps people in rooms they don't want to be in friendships that have become performances, in communities that have calcified around an identity they've outgrown. It is not inertia exactly, and it is not cowardice exactly. It is something more specific. It is the very reasonable human preference for a discomfort you know how to manage over a discomfort you don't. Staying in the wrong group was painful. But it was a pain I had developed techniques for. The driveway minutes, the selective scheduling, the practiced register of conversation. I had an infrastructure for that pain. The alternative, leaving, grieving the years, accepting that I had changed and that the change was real and irreversible, had no infrastructure. I would have to feel it without any system for managing it. I am not 31 anymore. The driveway where I sat in my car belongs to someone else now. I'm in a different city, in a different kind of life, with a smaller number of people I talk to more honestly. I don't have a group text I avoid. I have conversations I actually want to have. The difference between those two things is not subtle. It is the difference between a room you live in and a room you maintain. I still think about Sonia sometimes. About the text she sent, "You seem like you've been somewhere else for a while." She was the only one who named it. I wish I had been honest with her then. I think she would have understood. I think she might have been working on her own version of the same thing. Here is what I carry forward from this, and what I hope might be useful if you recognize any part of your own story in mine. The pattern I described does not operate because we are careless or unintelligent or unaware. It operates because it has a function, because it is doing something for us that we have not found another way to do. Staying in the wrong situation, staying silent when we should speak, not walking away when the door is right there, all of these behaviors persist because they are solving something, even if imperfectly. They are providing some version of comfort or protection or identity that we have not yet found a better way to provide. Understanding that function is the first move. Not judging the behavior, but asking honestly, what is this doing for me? What would I have to give up if I stopped? What am I afraid will happen if I make the change I know I need to make? Those questions do not dissolve the pattern automatically. But they make it visible in a new way. And visibility changes the relationship to the thing. When you can see what something is doing, you can start to choose whether you want it to keep doing it. The change that followed was not easier because I understood the mechanism. It was the same difficulty. But I went into it knowing what I was moving through rather than being entirely inside it without perspective. That perspective is what I want to pass on here. Not the specific story. The structure. The shape of how we stay in things longer than we should, how we look away from things we can see, how we tell ourselves the thing will change without giving it a mechanism for changing. You are not alone in this. It is not a character flaw. It is how the human nervous system manages uncertainty and fear. But you can do something different. The doing starts with the looking. Look at it. Directly. Honestly. Without the story that makes it easier to carry. And then decide what you want to do with what you see. That decision, fully conscious and fully yours, is the only kind that actually changes anything. There is also something I want to say about the specific moment of turning toward rather than away, the moment when you actually do the thing you have been not doing. Because that moment has a texture that I was not prepared for, and that I think is worth naming so you know what to expect when you reach it. It does not feel like relief. Not at first. The moment of change, of finally having the conversation, or walking away, or saying the thing, or making the decision, often feels worse before it feels better. There is a period of acute discomfort in which the old equilibrium has been disturbed but the new one has not yet settled. You have stopped managing the avoidance, which means the thing you were avoiding is now fully present, no longer softened by distance. That period is real and it is temporary. I want to say both of those things with equal emphasis. It is real. Do not be surprised by it, do not mistake it for evidence that you made the wrong choice. And it is temporary, it has a duration, and that duration is almost always shorter than the years of management that preceded it. The other side of that period is different. Not perfect, change does not produce perfection. But different in the specific way of someone who has stopped spending energy on maintaining something and can now spend that energy somewhere else. The ambient cost disappears. The weight that you had normalized as simply the weight of life turns out to have been specific and removable. I have felt that release more than once. Each time it is instructive about how much I had been carrying that I didn't know I was carrying. You probably know what you're carrying. You just haven't decided to put it down yet. When you decide, it will be hard first and better after. That is almost always the order of things. And the better, when it arrives, is real. What I notice now, In the life I have after the story I told here, is a kind of attentiveness I didn't have before. Not anxiety, that's different. Anxiety is looking for the thing that might go wrong. What I have is more like a quiet, ongoing check-in. Am I here because I want to be? Am I saying what I actually think? Am I moving toward what matters or managing around something I haven't named? These questions don't produce constant disruption. Most of the time the answer is, yes, I am where I want to be, saying what I think, moving in the right direction. The check-in confirms what I thought. And that confirmation is itself valuable. It builds a different relationship with my own choices. They feel more like choices and less like things happening to me. On the occasions when the answer is different, when the check-in reveals an avoidance or a suppression or a staying too long, I try to act on the information faster than I used to. Not immediately, not impulsively. But without the elaborate deferral structure. Without the "I'll address this when the conditions are better." The conditions will not be better. They will be different. Different is workable. Better is a fiction. I am the only condition that changes. And I change through the practice of looking and then acting on what I see. That's the whole thing. The looking and the acting. Over and over. For as long as it takes. Which is your whole life. But a whole life spent actually inside it is worth more than a whole life spent at the edge of it, managing the view. I know which one I want. I think you do too.